You are listening to ProveText, a Glossa House podcast exploring Scripture with Dr. T. Michael W. Halcomb and Dr. Frederick J. Long. Welcome and enjoy.
Hello, welcome to ProveText. This is Michael Halcomb. I'm here with Fred Long, and he is schooling us on participles as part of our GrammarPoint series. And Fred, what do you have on the platter today?
Yeah, we're continuing our study of participles, and we're looking at, I think, one of the most exciting areas of research for me, and that is looking at what are called circumstantial participles, or very commonly what people call adverbial participles, which is a misnomer. Okay, I've presented on this at Society of Biblical Literature. It's unpublished, although it is published in my Greek grammar book, my categories and my discussion, but I went into more detail and I'm looking forward to continuing to research this. Basically, though, beginning students will learn that there's a use of the participle called adverbial that basically is when the participle, typically in the nominative cases, sets up a subordinate clause, an adverbial subordinate clause, and then students are encouraged to try different adverbial senses depending on the context a little bit. And they have different like subcategories and names like temporal, adverbial, concessional, adverbial, that'd be although.
Yeah, this is how I learned. Yeah,
conditional, like if, causal, because. So basically it's taught, students are taught that participles have or carry these adverbial meanings in them. And then students are left trying to guess what that might be. But here's the problem, is that in fact, grammatically, participles are unmarked for adverbial meanings. This was recognized over a decade ago by one of the most preeminent grammarians of the day, and even today's stature is huge, A.T. Robertson, in his grammar. He says, in fact, these participles are unmarked for adverbial senses. The only possible adverbial meanings that they may convey is temporal, time prior or time after the main verb. So I think we need to scratch that whole model, be very cautious of it, and move towards another understanding, which is, you'll see in grammar books, and simply calling them circumstantial participles, and that are really setting up certain kinds of subordinate relations, but the meaning of that relationship is not primarily adverbial. It's positional, depending on where that participle occurs. Is it occurring before the main verb of its clause or occurring after the main verb of its clause? And so this is my approach to this. You can read it in my Koine Greek Grammar, chapter 17. I explain this in more detail. And I want to talk about those circumstantial participle uses that occur before the main verb. Okay, I call these pre-nuclear or pre-positioned uses. And basically, if you see a circumstantial participle that's occurring before the main verb, and you know that they're circumstantial because they have no article with them, and they're typically in the nominative case. And if they're far away from the main verb, I consider these to be segue. If they're segueing between one scenario to another scenario, like, for example, you might say, Jesus leaving that city, he went on somewhere else. That leaving would be a segue use, and it's based on position. It's prior to the main verb. And segue, transitional use, the segue use tends to be far away from the main verb. Another pre-positioned use or pre-nuclear use is I would call framework. and that is it's setting up an important framework by which to understand the action of the main verb. And then another use, the last use, a prepositioned use, is when that participle is directly abutted to the main verb. Like bowing down, he prayed to so and so. So bowing down, he prayed. This
like
is
simultaneous, kind of.
Yeah, it's almost simultaneous. I call them procedural. And basically, what happens is you can take away that participle, and it doesn't destroy the meaning of the sense at all, and rather seems to be describing in more detail, like a set of procedures that entail in the action of the main verb. It's almost to stress it or to preserve some cultural information. So in the example I just gave you, bowing down or bowing the knee, he prayed or prostrated. Well, there were different types of prostration that one could do. One could simply put out one's arm, one could bow, or one could actually kneel. So in that instance of, bending the knee, he prostrated himself, that bending the knee, that is a procedural prepositioned participle, and it's preserving some cultural logic. So all I have to say is that when you have a circumstantial participle in front of its main verb, there are three uses: a segue, providing a transition; framework, and providing an important framework; or procedural, which is kind of, getting to some logic of the verbal action. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to be studied of this. And so those are the pre-nuclear positions. And I think we'll have an episode where we talk about some translational possibilities for these as well. I guess we could maybe do that now. I tend to, if they're present tense, use maybe like seeing the crowd, comma, Jesus went to a mountain. Sometimes people might say, while seeing the crowd or after seeing the crowd. But again, those while and after or because, those are all adding adverbial meanings to it. And again, I just don't think that those meanings are inherent in the participle itself. So I like a basic translation of the participle, like seeing or, bending the knee, he prayed. I think just using ing words is quite fine. And if there really does seem to be a temporal aspect, fine. You can say, like contemporaneous present tense while seeing the crowd. Fine. You could add that to it as well.
Yeah, I tend in that direction, actually. I guess maybe that's just part of how I was taught. But when I'm reading the gospel narratives, contextually, like so often, like you have that aorist participle, after blanking or after he blanked, he blanked, or present tense participle does seem to be what you call procedural or simultaneous. While blanking, he blanked,
For the aorist, I don't even know that you need after. I just use like having seen the crowd.
Yeah. I like after. I don't know.
Seeing the crowd. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. So I'm wondering if there's you are granting space for the, time prior, time after. There's also a time during,
time during, temporal, simultaneous. Present tense seem to be same time as the main verb.
Yeah.
Aorist tense seems to be time prior, but I can point to examples where it's not temporal.
Right.
With aorist, so then it's like, well, what is really being marked here? And that's why I'm moving towards this information structural model based on location.
Do you think genre has anything to do with it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think genre would have a lot to do with it. I think Paul's letter, like argumentative discourse, is going to have a lot more logical kind of things, whereas narrative obviously is about sequencing of time events.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, good. That's helpful. Appreciate that insight, Fred.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say one other, if you want to see Michael and I, how we've translated these participles in context, look at our John illustrated or Mark illustrated in Greek or my Acts illustrated in Greek with Matthew Peterson. We debated these things and talked about them. And if you want to see how we translate these participles, you can see that it's possible to do it in a minimal way that leaves it open, for inferencing, what is the logical connection. Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for the insights, Fred, and thanks you guys for listening. Hope that helps.
Looking for creative ways to launch your biblical language studies to the next level? We here at Glossa House create resources with you in mind. We've created a stock of innovative and cutting-edge audio, video, digital, and print resources to help you reach your language goals. Visit glossahouse.com to find what you've been looking for. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.